I yield 1 minute to the distinguished Democratic leader, Mr. Jeffries.
Leaders recognized.
I thank the distinguished gentleman from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Richie Neal, for yielding and for his tremendous leadership. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill, this disgusting abomination, the GOP tax scam that guts Medicaid, rips food from the mouths of children, seniors, and veterans, and rewards billionaires with massive tax breaks. Every single Democrat stands in strong opposition to this bill because we're standing up for the American people. Mr. Speaker, I've heard a lot from my Republican colleagues who've expressed pride in this accomplishment. I asked the question, if Republicans were so proud of this one big, ugly bill, why did debate begin at 3:28 a.m. in the morning? Republicans are once again, which has been the case, Mr. Speaker, through every step of this journey, tried to jam this bill through the House of Representatives under cover of darkness. But I'm here today to make it clear that I'm going to take my time and ensure that the American people fully understand how damaging this bill will be to their quality of life. Now, Republicans and Donald Trump promised that costs would go down on day one. Costs haven't gone down under Donald Trump and House Republicans here in the United States of America. In fact, costs have gone up. We believe that America is too expensive, that the cost of living is too high, that that's a priority that should be worked on in a bipartisan way. But from the very beginning of this Congress, our Republican colleagues have shown no interest in addressing the high cost of living in the United States of America. Not a single executive order has been issued by this administration, Mr. Speaker, to address the high cost of living. Not a single bill has been passed, Mr. Speaker, to address the high cost of living in the United States of America. And this bill, this one big, ugly bill, this reckless Republican budget, this disgusting abomination, is not about improving the quality of life of the American people. It will hurt everyday Americans in several different ways. This bill represents the largest cut to health care in American history. It's an all-out assault on the health care of the American people, an assault on Medicaid, an assault on Medicare, an assault on the Children's Health Insurance Program, an assault on the Affordable Care Act, an assault on Planned Parenthood and the health care of women all across the United States of America, an unprecedented assault on the American people and their health care. Almost $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid. This runs directly contrary to what President Trump indicated in January, which was that he was going to love and cherish Medicaid. Nothing about this bill loves and cherishes Medicaid. It guts Medicaid. It guts Medicaid in a way that's going to hurt children, hurt families, hurt seniors, hurt people with disabilities, hurt women, hurt everyday Americans. Hospitals will close, including all throughout rural America. Mr. Speaker. Nursing homes will shut down. By some estimates, 1 in 4 nursing homes will close as a result of this one big, ugly bill. And community-based health clinics, which are the lifelines in neighborhood after neighborhood all across this country, in urban America, in rural America, in suburban America, in small-town America, in the heartland of America, will not be able to operate. And as a result of the lack of health care that will result directly from this one big ugly bill, people in America will die. Unnecessary deaths. That is outrageous. It's disgusting. That is not what we should be doing here in the United States House of Representatives. Not what we should be doing. In addition to the cuts to Medicaid, this bill will result in the largest cut to Medicare in American history. By some estimates, more than $500 billion in cuts to Medicare as a result of the Republicans' one big, ugly bill. This bill will also result in a devastating blow to the Affordable Care Act. That's no surprise because since 2010, Republicans, Mr. Speaker, have been trying to gut and destroy the Affordable Care Act. And as a result of the damage that is done to the Affordable Care Act in this legislation, millions of Americans will lose their health care. The assault on health care in this one big, ugly bill will result in more than 17 million Americans losing health care in the United States of America. Shame on the people who've decided to launch that kind of all-out assault on the health and the well-being of everyday Americans. That's not what we should be doing here in the United States House of Representatives. And because of the drastic cuts that are made to health care in this one big ugly bill, people with private insurance all across America are going to experience increases in their premiums, their copays, and their deductibles. Millions of Americans in every corner of this country, an all-out assault on health care. That's a very different vision, Mr. Speaker, that Republicans have working hard to take health care away from the American people than our vision, because we believe, as Democrats, that in the United States of America, health care should not simply be a privilege. Health care is a right that should be available to every single person in the United States of America. This bill is an all-out assault on the health care of the people of the United States of America, hard-working American taxpayers. These are the people we should be standing up to work hard to lift up. But instead, they're victims of this legislation. Hospitals will close. That impacts everybody in the United States of America. If your hospital closes, whether you're on Medicaid or not, you will be unable to get the treatment that you or your family needs. That's why we're fighting so hard to stop this bill. 1 in 4 nursing homes, by some estimates, will close as a result of the Republicans' assault on Medicaid in this one big, ugly bill. This bill also represents an assault on nutritional assistance here in the United States of America. We've made great progress over the last 50-plus years as it relates to hunger in this country. Great progress. But we're still dealing with the reality that tens of millions of people in this country go to bed every night wondering whether they're going to be able to get a nutritious meal the next day. Tens of millions of people in this country, millions of children. And instead of trying to address that issue, Mr. Speaker, the one big ugly bill will rip nutritional benefits away from millions of Americans, including children, rip food from the mouths of hungry children and hungry veterans and hungry seniors. That is unacceptable. That's one of the reasons why we stand in strong opposition, Mr. Speaker, to this one big, ugly bill. Republicans promised to address the high cost of living in the United States of America. We believe that the cost of living is too high. Housing costs are too high. Grocery costs are too high. Utility costs are too high. Insurance costs are too high. Child care costs are too high. America is too expensive. There are far too many people in this country struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. That should not be the case in the United States of America. But instead of addressing the high cost of living in this one big ugly bill, Mr. Speaker, Republicans are actually going to increase costs, particularly as it relates to the energy bills that everyday Americans pay. Estimated that energy bills will increase by hundreds of dollars a year. That has nothing to do with lowering the high cost of living, making this country a more affordable place. It does the exact opposite. It's an all-out and unnecessary assault on the clean energy tax credits. The clean energy tax credits that many of my Republican colleagues promised in letter after letter after letter that you would stand behind, but all chose to fold and abandon, fighting instead for special interests and opposing the ability for this country to stand up a cleaner energy economy, which means cheaper energy. And because of the attack on clean energy jobs, on the clean energy economy, on the economic development that had already been set in motion, often in districts represented by my Republican colleagues and in Republican-led states, red states. By some estimates, millions of jobs are going to be lost. And so you're ripping health care away from millions of Americans, Mr. Speaker, ripping food away from children and veterans and seniors, raising the cost of utilities, of paying your energy bill by hundreds of dollars, stripping away millions of jobs all across America. And what is all of this being done for? To provide massive tax breaks to billionaires all across this country. We are better than that in the United States of America. When we take an oath, convene here, come to the United States Capitol, our job is to make life better for everyday Americans. But the genesis of this bill, the focus of this bill, the justification for all of the cuts that will hurt everyday Americans in this bill is to provide massive tax breaks for billionaires. It's extraordinary. Never in my time here in Congress have I experienced legislation that benefits so few people who fall into the category of the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, while at the same time hurting everyday Americans, that we should be fighting hard to help. Now, all of this apparently is being rushed because the decision was made by President Trump that he would like to get a bill done by the 4th of July. What does the 4th of July have to do with this one big, ugly bill? What does celebrating American independence, the birth of this exceptional country, the journey that we've been on for 249 years, what does any of that have to do with this one big, ugly bill? I would suggest, Mr. Speaker, that if you actually look at the Declaration of Independence, what we find is that everything about this one big, ugly bill runs in direct contrast with what was set in motion by the framers and the founders of our great country. Of course, the Declaration of Independence, authored by Thomas Jefferson, makes the famous statement that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mr. Speaker, I want to lock in for just a moment on that aspirational objective, the pursuit of happiness. Because when it comes to everyday Americans, this one big, ugly bill will hurt the quality of life of hardworking American taxpayers, and it's all designed to put a happy smile on the face of billionaires. That is inconsistent with the Declaration of Independence and what we should be celebrating on July 4th. I think what Thomas Jefferson and the framers of this country, they set us out on a course of action, a journey, a march toward a more perfect union, in part anchored in the pursuit of happiness, which decade after decade, century after century, leaders who sat at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, leaders in this Congress on both sides of the aisle tried to bring about for the greatest number of Americans. But that's not what this one big ugly bill is all about. America is too expensive. There are far too many people who are living paycheck to paycheck here in this great country. That should not be the case. People who are struggling to survive, to make ends meet. Mr. Speaker, Imagine a country where everyone can afford to live the good life. Work hard, play by the rules, and live the good life. We haven't reached that place in the United States of America. Imagine a country where everyone can work hard, play by the rules, and live the good life. Good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. Which means keep your hands off Social Security and Medicare, now and forever. Now and forever. We want a country where every single American can afford to live the good life. Good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and then a good retirement. And we know that in the United States of America, to unlock that quintessential American dream, living the good life, you have to work hard and play by the rules. But the challenge that so many Americans have right now in this country is that they're doing those two things. They're working hard and they're playing by the rules, but they're unable to experience the great American dream. They're unable to get to that third leg. They're unable to live the good life. And that's what we should be focusing on here in the United States Congress. Not gutting Medicaid, not ripping food out of the mouths of hungry children, not rewarding billionaires with massive tax breaks. How can you prepare to celebrate legislation that will undermine the quality of life of everyday Americans? It's not just a hypothetical, it's not just hyperbole, it's not just hype. It will happen. Everyday Americans will be hurt by the one big ugly bill. We're here on the floor of the House of Representatives, debating legislation in the middle of the night, with millions of Americans having gone to sleep anxious about what would happen. Here on the floor of the House of Representatives, understandably concerned that their voices have not been heard in this debate, that their pleas for compassion have been overlooked. Many of my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, on the other side of the aisle have chosen not to hold town hall meetings, not to hear from the voices of the people that you're privileged to represent. But we've embraced the American people. We haven't run from the American people. House Democrats will continue to run toward the American people and lift their voices up. Lift their voices up. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take a little time to share some of the stories of the American people. Voices that might otherwise be excluded from this debate. But we're not going to let those voices be excluded. We will ensure that these voices are heard. we will continue to do everything we can to bring those voices to life, here on the House floor and beyond, to stand up for the best interests of everyday Americans. And we've heard from many of them. Throughout this process, I'll share just a handful. With Medicaid expansion, I now qualify for Medicaid. Without insurance, my monthly bill for my 3 injectable drugs would be $3,000, $36,000 a year. And that doesn't include any of my other meds or my medical appointments. Who has that kind of money? That's Charles, who lives in Alaska, district represented by Congressman Nick Begich. Medicare and Social Security keep me alive. I'm surviving on about $13,000 a year, most of it from my Social Security checks. That's just enough to afford my rent, utilities, and food. Without Social Security, I would be homeless. And if Medicare did not pay for my medications, if I had to pay full price, I wouldn't be able to survive. There are so many other seniors who are in the same boat. Without these programs, seniors like me would die on the street. That's Paula, who lives in Arkansas's 2nd Congressional District, represented by my colleague, Congressman French Hill. My son is a 25-year-old young adult with profound nonverbal autism who needs 24/7 support. Our family has relied on Medicaid from the time he was 2 years old, when he began early intervention services. At 3, when he was diagnosed with autism, a private health insurance denied him coverage for his pre-existing condition. Medicaid stepped in to provide health care. From that point until today, home and community-based services through Medicaid have been vital to our son's health and well-being. Medicaid also helped his school district pay for medically necessary therapies at school. Our son is thriving and healthy, and our family can support him at home because of Medicaid. That's Robin. She lives in Arizona's 1st Congressional District, represented by David Swiker. These are stories from everyday Americans who've written to us to say to this Congress, stand up for our health care, Mr. Speaker. Don't stand up for billionaires. Stand up for everyday Americans, for our health, for our safety, and for our well-being. Gwendolyn from Arizona, she also writes, she says Medicaid is the difference between my son being healthy, happy, cared for, and social, versus being at home with aging parents who struggle to physically provide the care that is required daily. Medicaid funding means my son receives the incontinent supplies he needs, the internal feeding supplies he needs to live, and medications that his primary insurance won't cover. Medicaid matters because without it, my son and millions of others like him may not survive. Let me speak directly to Gwendolyn from Arizona. Her representative may not be fighting on your behalf. As House Democrats, we're here to say to you, we agree. Medicaid matters and it must be preserved. It must be preserved. Because Medicaid matters to millions of people all across this great country, to children, to seniors, to people with disabilities, to women, to families, to people in every corner of the United States of America. Yes, Gwendolyn, Medicaid matters. And if your representative won't fight for it, we will. Brenda? Says to us, my youngest child is a nonverbal 43-year-old female with autism who has been on Medicaid since she was 12. She's had 3 major surgeries and 6 or more outpatient surgeries, all made possible because of Medicaid. We would not have been able to get our daughter what she needed if it wasn't for Medicaid. She also has a seizure disorder and is on several medications. Some of them are way too expensive for us to afford on a blue-collar income. Finding doctors that are good and accept Medicaid are few and far between. But some doctors are better than none. And the only way our daughter will get any medical care at all. She is one of the most vulnerable people in society. And caring for her is a full-time job. For myself and her father, who are both retired and are full-time care providers for her. I am not sure why anyone would want to take this help and service from people whose very life depends on the help it provides. That's a powerful and profound question. Why would anyone in this House vote to take away Medicaid from the American people amongst the most vulnerable here in the United States of America? Brenda from Arizona lives in Arizona's 6th congressional district, represented by my colleague, Congressman Juan Ciscomani. Garrett, also from Arizona. I'm still in the A section right now. So strap in as we make sure we lift up the voices of everyday Americans all across this country. It's important that we take note. This isn't abstract, taking away health care from the American people. It's concrete, it's real. It has devastating implications. Garrett says, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at birth. Cerebral palsy at birth. Thanks to Medicaid, I was able to undergo multiple surgeries that significantly improved my ability to walk, transforming both my mobility and daily life. Relying on Medicaid, SNAP in the past, and SSI, I worry about what would happen to me and my friends if these programs were taken away. Without them, I wouldn't be able to keep up with doctor's appointments, medications, and transportation. Earlier today, my distinguished colleague from the great Commonwealth of Virginia read a passage of Scripture, one of my favorite passages of Scripture, Matthew 25 and 35 through 40. And later on this morning, as I continue my remarks, perhaps I'll have an opportunity to go a little deeper into the meaning of Matthew 25 and 35. What I can say is that all of us should be trying to lift up the least, the lost, the left behind, the poor, the sick, and the afflicted. Garrett tells us, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy at birth. And the first thing that jumped out to me when I read this was that we're all God's children, and we should be looking after all God's children to the best of our ability, not running away from them and undermining their quality of life. So Garrett, we're going to continue to stand up and work hard on your behalf. Nancy from California. That's a great name, Nancy from California. Nancy from California writes, my two special health needs, former foster children, depend on Medicaid for a dizzying array of health services, ranging from over 20 pediatric medical specialists and palliative care to behavioral health and occupational therapies. They both have rare, incurable, disabling diseases that require IEPs to navigate school. She continues, but I want to pause right there. I think that's an important point, talking about her children and the IEPs to navigate school. We should be looking out for children like Nancy's two beautiful former foster care children, her two special health needs children, as she calls them. It's one of the reasons why the Department of Education is important. Public schools are important. Nothing in this bill supports public education. In fact, this one big, ugly bill represents an attack on public education. And that is not consistent with what we should be doing as we prepare to celebrate our 249th birthday and lifting up this pursuit of happiness. Nancy continues, the ACA protections for pre-existing conditions and the removal of lifetime caps are also essential. My youngest child requires medical care that I simply cannot afford, costing between $750,000 and $1 million per year, depending on how stable her health is. I work part-time, but the caregiver burden is too demanding for me to maintain a full-time job. As a single widowed mother, Medicaid has become a lifeline for keeping my kids as well as possible. Nancy lives in California's 1st congressional district, represented by my colleague, Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Laura lives in the Central Valley of California, an area of the country with the highest concentration of Medicaid recipients. The highest concentration of Medicaid recipients. I've been raising my 6 grandchildren for 15 years, and they are coming of age, but not many jobs are available. Also, my 16-year-old grandson depends on Medicaid and EBT to survive. He takes many medications a day. If you're not going to respect my ability to speak, respect the story that I'm telling on behalf of Laura. Respect her story, because her story matters. Her story matters, and the American people matter.
We need order.
He takes many medications a day. I'm too old to do anything but take care of him. I can't imagine choosing what medicines he gets or who gets to eat. Please reconsider for the people who need medication that is necessary for survival. Universal access to food and meds would lighten the worry that we carry. Not having to worry about food and medicines gives me more time to care for my 26-year-old grandson, who is quadriplegic due to a head-on collision last year. Please don't make him suffer anymore. He needs food supplements and many medications every day to survive. Laura lives in California's 22nd congressional district, a district that is represented by my colleague, Congressman David Valadao. Just happens to be the district that has the highest concentration of Medicaid recipients in this country. Laura, I don't know what your Congress member is going to do. Every single House Democrat is fighting hard to protect your Medicaid. We value you, and we're working hard to defend you. Jackie is from the Orange County area of California. My son is 34 years old. He has Down syndrome and autism, and lives at home with his aging parents, Dad, 82, and Mom, 71. His biggest joys in life for him are his day program and eating out. How small are his desires? And you want to take that away from him. He requires much care. Bathing, shaving, washing hair, brushing teeth, dressing, etc. His aging parents can do the job required for this 100% of the time. He has great caregivers right now, and they have been with him for many years. Now you want to take that away from us? Please know that Medicaid, Medi-Cal, is what allows us to keep him in a safe and happy environment that he will not get anywhere else. And for a whole lot less money. Why should that change for him? Jackie asked. Please be respectful of families who have high-need family members who need these services. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of my son and everyone who loves him. Jackie lives in California's 40th congressional district, a district represented by my colleague, Congresswoman Young Kim. Kayla writes to us from Colorado. At 26, I was diagnosed with brain cancer, a discovery I was only able to make because of Medicaid. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to get the treatment I need to survive. That diagnosis changed my life. And while I am grateful to be here, I can no longer work. Now I rely on disability benefits, food stamps, just to get by. These programs are the only reason I'm able to live. Without this support, I don't know how I would manage. Kayla lives in Colorado's 2nd congressional district, a district represented by the Assistant Democratic Leader, Joe Neguse. Kayla, I can say to you that your Congress member is fighting hard to protect you, just like every single member of the House Democratic Caucus. Ashley writes to us from Colorado. She says, my life was saved by the Affordable Care Act. Because of this act, I was able to stay on my parents' health insurance when I couldn't get any coverage. At the time, I was dealing with a myriad of health issues and would eventually be diagnosed with multiple chronic illnesses. Because of the ACA, when my husband and I were married, I was able to be added to his insurance without being denied due to pre-existing conditions. Prior to the act being passed, I was denied coverage and care many times. If I was even approved for coverage, it cost me thousands per month in premiums. I was being penalized, Mr. Speaker, for being sick. There were many times when I could not get coverage that I had to choose between which prescriptions I would get to have or whether I would get all my meds or the groceries we needed. You know, there are far too many people in the United States of America right now, before experiencing the devastating consequences of this one big, ugly bill, who have to choose between putting food on the table, clothing on their backs, access to medication, or paying the rent. The United States of America is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Not a single hard-working American taxpayer should ever have to choose between food or medicine or rent or putting clothing on their back. Not a single hard-working American taxpayer should ever have to make that choice. If people did not have to worry about health care being accessible, they would be able to be seen when necessary. And when people are able to see doctors when they are unwell, they can stay healthy for longer periods of time. When people can stay healthy, they don't miss work. When people don't miss work, they don't risk losing their jobs. The way things work now only encourages the constant classist act of keeping the sick and poor sick and poor. This should never, ever be a situation in a country that claims to have the best functioning economy in the world, the best doctors, the best universities. Ashley lives in Colorado's 3rd congressional district.
The gentleman is not recognized. The House will be in order.
Ashley
New York's recognized.
Lives in Colorado's 3rd congressional district, represented by my colleague, Congressman Jeff Hurd. Ann also writes from Colorado. Through the Medicaid waiver, Scott, Ann's son, was placed in a group living situation that worked out for a while, but was eventually kicked out. After that, he moved back in with me, but ended up homeless once more, before finally being placed back on a Medicaid waiver program. Now he's doing really well. His job, which he loves, also receives funding through Medicaid, so that people with disabilities can be employed and be productive members of the community. Without Medicaid, he probably wouldn't be alive today. Without this assistance, we likely wouldn't be where we are now. And I doubt that there would be a happy ending to this story. Ann lives in Colorado's 6th congressional district, a district represented by our colleague, Congressman Jason Crow, who is also fighting hard to protect your interests, and as every single one of us in the House Democratic Caucus will continue to do. We believe in America, health care is not simply a privilege that should be afforded to the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. It's a right that should be available to everyone. A right that is still imperfect at this moment, that we are working hard to perfect. But this one big ugly bill, the largest attack on health care, Mr. Speaker, in the United States of America, moves us in the opposite direction. Daniela is also from Colorado. She writes to us, Medicaid has been a lifeline for our family, especially for my 5-year-old daughter who has autism. That's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Medicaid is important for so many Americans all across this country, including people with disabilities. It's a necessary lifeline so that parents can help their children live a better life with dignity and respect. Why would any legislation that this House passes attack health care available to families that are pouring in everything they have to help their child under difficult circumstances live the best possible life? It perplexes me, Mr. Speaker, that this bill would go after the health care of people like Daniela and her 5-year-old daughter. Daniela says that as parents, we've faced many struggles trying to balance full-time work, starting a real estate business, and still being there for our 3 other children. It's been overwhelming at times, and finding the right support for her hasn't always been easy. But Medicaid has provided therapy and services that have made a world of difference in her life. These therapies have helped her make progress, feel seen, and connect with her peers, which means everything to us. It's allowed her to be a part of the world, to feel included, and to overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable at times. Medicaid has helped us give her the opportunities she deserves, and millions of other children in the United States. Mr. Speaker, Daniela lives in Colorado's 8th Congressional District, a district currently represented by Congressman Gabe Evans. Currently represented. Mr. Speaker, we heard from Martha, who writes from Florida. I have an adult daughter with developmental and intellectual disabilities who needs Medicaid for her medical care. As a mom, I worry a lot about what the future will hold for her. Will she have access to quality medical care when my husband is no longer able to provide for her? Please support individuals like my daughter who are vulnerable and need our help. Thank you from my heart. Martha lives in Florida's 7th congressional district, a district represented by our colleague, Mr. Speaker, Congressman Corey Mills. We've heard from people from the heartland of this country. In Indiana, Kim writes to us, SNAP and Medicaid were lifelines when my children were younger. At least when I was able to get them. As a single mom, working my way up from low-paying jobs, we often had too little food. My dinner was the combined uneaten food from my 4 kids' plates. Even then, keeping benefits was difficult due to missing or late paperwork, faxes lost to the ether. I sometimes worked 3 jobs and cried too often when the letter came saying benefits were suspended. When that happens, you end up hungry for weeks until it's straightened out. Kim lives in the 9th Congressional District of Indiana, Mr. Speaker. She says, SNAP and Medicaid were lifelines when my children were younger, at least when I was able to get them. Let me park right there for a moment, because one of the arguments that I've consistently heard made, Mr. Speaker, by our Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle is that they weren't going after Medicaid recipients, that no benefits would be taken away as a result of these so-called work requirements. Let's fact check that statement. Every independent entity that has looked at this question, including the Congressional Budget Office, has made clear, as a result of the one big, ugly bill, millions of Americans will lose their Medicaid benefits. These so-called work requirements are just a smokescreen, because more than 90% of the people who receive Medicaid benefits who can work, do work right now in the United States of America. Right now, more than 90%. What these impositions are really paperwork requirements that are designed to make it harder for everyday Americans like Kim to access their benefits. And as a result, millions of Americans who are eligible, who are hardworking, who are deserving, will lose their health care. Kim says, I sometimes worked 3 jobs and cried too often when the letter came saying benefits were suspended. As House Democrats, Mr. Speaker, we are here fighting for people like Kim, and millions of others like her all across the United States of America who will lose urgently necessary, life-changing, and life-sustaining Medicaid benefits as a result of Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill. We hear from Maria, from Iowa, in the great heartland of this country. Maria writes to us in 2021, I got seriously sick with COVID. I ended up in a coma for 12 days, spent 3.5 weeks in the ICU, and then another 3 weeks on the recovery floor. If it wasn't for Medicaid, I wouldn't have received any of the care I needed. I honestly don't know where I'd be today. I don't know what my family would have done. Without Medicaid, I wouldn't have made it. If I lost Medicaid, it would completely change my life. I wouldn't be able to afford my insulin, diabetes medications, blood pressure medications, or see my endocrinologist, all of which are life-sustaining treatments. I also need to see my pulmonary specialist regularly. Without Medicaid, my health would deteriorate rapidly. That's a statement that applies to millions of Americans all across this great country. Who are at risk of losing their health care because this one big, ugly Republican bill has put a target on their back. Mr. Speaker, without Medicaid, my health would deteriorate. Taking the time to share these stories because this is a question for so many Americans of life and death. It's extraordinary that on the House floor, in the middle of the night, the American people are forced to confront a bill that targets their health care and will result in their well-being deteriorating. More than 17 million Americans at risk of losing health care coverage, and then tens of millions more experiencing increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles as a result of the attack on health care in this bill. Many of them will also lose coverage, lose their health care. These are Americans on private insurance, employer-provided insurance, but because of the health care attacks in this bill, their premiums, their co-pays, their deductibles will go up some will not be able to afford it, and they will lose their health care. That's what this bill represents. That's why I'm taking the time to share these stories and experiences and concerns and fears and anxieties of the American people. I wish, Mr. Speaker, that we had a lot more time to debate this bill. This is the type of bill that under normal circumstances, we'd have hours and hours of debate, where hundreds of members could participate on both sides of the aisle and share their thoughts, their perspectives, their ideas, their passionate support or passionate opposition. But this bill, which by some estimates is larger than the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the CHIPS and Science Act combined in terms of its possible impact on the debt in this country, increasing the debt by more than $3 trillion, saddling our children and grandchildren with that level of extraordinary debt by people who claim to be fiscally responsible. The implications of this bill are enormous. And yet, each side of the Ways and Means Committee was given 15 minutes to discuss the implications of this bill. Each side of the Budget Committee was given 15 minutes to discuss the implications of this bill that will have devastating consequences for everyday Americans, while rewarding billionaires with massive tax breaks. It had been my hope, Mr. Speaker, that we'd be able to have a robust debate, passionate support or passionate opposition in connection with this bill, that hundreds of members on both sides of the aisle could participate in. Instead, we have a limited debate where the relevant committees of jurisdiction have been given 15 minutes each on a bill of such significant magnitude as it relates to the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people. And because that debate was so limited, I feel the obligation, Mr. Speaker, to stand on this House floor and take my sweet time to tell the stories of the American people. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Take my sweet time on behalf of the American people, on behalf of their health care, on behalf of their Medicaid, on behalf of their nutritional assistance, on behalf of veterans, on behalf of farmers, on behalf of children, on behalf of seniors, on behalf of people with disabilities, on behalf of small businesses, on behalf of every single American. I'm on this House floor after 6 a.m., and I'm planning to take my sweet time. Without Medicaid, I wouldn't have made it. If I lost Medicaid, it would completely change my life. It would also severely affect my husband with epilepsy. Without Medicaid, he wouldn't be able to afford his seizure medications, which means he'd have seizures every week, like he did before. This would leave him unable to function or work. Before he had Medicaid, he'd have a seizure. And it would take him days to recover. His health is inconsistent, which makes it hard for him to hold down a job.